So welcome everyone, and I'm so excited to be talking to the incredible Kathryn Morgan. Kathryn is a legend in the classical dance world, but for those who may not know her, and I'm especially excited to introduce her to members of the Broadway community who may not be familiar with her work or her platform. Kathryn studied at the School of American Ballet and then joined New York City Ballet, where she had an extraordinary rise through the company. She danced roles like Juliet, Aurora, and the Sugar Plum Fairy, all but right out of the gate, and was promoted to soloist just 3 years after starting as an apprentice. She's appeared on the Today Show, won the Ween Award, the Movado Future Legends Award, and the Janice Levin Award, and has gone on to dance as a soloist at Miami City Ballet and guest with many companies across the country. But perhaps what has most set Kathryn apart is her online platform that was well ahead of its time when she started it. After developing a medical condition that threatened to derail her career, Kathryn was one of, if not the first person in the dance industry to start an online channel that offered free classes, tutorials, tips and tricks, and a behind-the-scenes look at the world of being a professional dancer. Not only is she an extraordinary teacher, but she is a mentor, and true inspiration to an enormous, diverse online community, and she's working to change the conversation about mental health, sizeism, and training within the artistic community at large. I'm especially excited to delve into the dance world today with Kathryn. I started dancing when I was 2, and I'm still a serious dancer. And it's always frustrated me that for all our talk about the integrated musical or the importance of movement in straight plays, acting, singing, and dancing seem to be on separate sides of the conversation in the Broadway community. So welcome, Kathryn, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Ashley. And thank you for that introduction. I should pay you for that bio.
No, was there anything of a special import that I left out that you'd like to add?
No, it's perfect.
Awesome. So my goal today is as much as possible to avoid asking you anything that you've been asked in any previous interviews. And I would strongly encourage our listeners to check out all of those wonderful interviews and your YouTube channel, because there's a lot of really important things that you discuss, and I think that everyone should be aware of. So the first thing I'd love to start by asking you is, can you share a bit about your story of starting your online platform? And I know it started long before COVID and became something of a paradigm, but you were kind of the first one to do it. And how did that come about?
It's funny because I had just left New York City Ballet and I was very, very ill with my autoimmune condition at the time. I don't even know if we had diagnosed it yet. I think it was still in the holding pattern of I didn't know what was wrong. And I was really, really tired and really not doing well and just sort of depressed. And when you're at home and sitting on the couch and feeling sorry for yourself, what you do is you sit and you watch YouTube videos. At least that's what I did. And I'm sitting there watching makeup guru after makeup guru. And it suddenly clicked in my head, there are no ballet dancers. Where, for all the yoga classes and the fitness and the makeup and the, lifestyle people, there were no ballet dancers. Maybe the occasional 12-year-old who started a channel, but nothing like from a professional. And then I thought, well, I got nothing better to do, because at that point I was still trying to maybe get back into City Ballet. I didn't know what was happening. I had saved a bunch of money, so I didn't feel the need to have to go immediately get a job. So I was really fortunate in that. But I just started, I was like, well, let's get a camera. Let's, see what happens. And I started with videos here because at the time I was very ashamed of what I looked like. And I just was not happy with my body. So I started with this, and then it gradually turned into ballet classes, and it gradually turned into tips and things. And now that was 2014. So it's been 7 years now, and it's just exploded, and it's become a whole platform for me to talk about things and address issues. And I'm still doing the classes, but now I'm also back dancing. And so it's been a way for me to showcase my own dancing without worrying about where am I going to get a gig and how, and there's a theater. If I feel the need to dance something, I have a really special video coming out on December 10th, by the way, but stay tuned. It's a platform for me to talk and teach and dance. And it's just become this wonderful community of people. I have wonderful viewers. I very rarely, knock on wood, get a bad comment. It's just a really happy, positive place, which is what I want it to be. And I think it's because I'm trying to stay true to myself and to not try and be somebody else or not try and be the perfect ballerina. I kind of get real on there too. Mm-hmm. About this is what's happening. This is the ballet world, and I think people really appreciate that, because ballet can tend to be very oh, everything's perfect and we have to look like, and it's so not what it is. And I think that doesn't work in this day and age anymore. So
Yeah. And I know you've said that when you first started, a lot of people thought it was a little crazy or whatnot, you starting a YouTube channel. And why do you think they thought that? How did you respond? And how has the general feeling about this in the dance world changed? And why do you think that's happened?
my mother was one of them.
Oh,
She was like,
no.
what are you doing? Like,
Oh,
she's like,
no.
YouTube, you're gonna film yourself? That sounds really dumb. And recently through COVID, she finally turned to me and she was like, I get it now.
Mhm.
Like, I get it.
Yeah.
And I think people, especially a lot of my colleagues, a lot of ballet people, again, there's this vision of smoke and mirrors of everything has to be perfect and seamless and we're these ethereal beings. And I was pulling back the cobwebs and pulling back the drapes on that. And I think people were slightly scared. They were like, I don't know if this is a good idea. She's going to ruin the ballet world.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to give hints and tips and tricks, because I remember being 11 and no one taught me how to sew or tie my point shoes. It was sort of just like, figure it
Gosh.
out. And so everybody was slightly worried. 7 years later,
Mhm.
now everybody's like, oh, I love what you're doing. It's so good. I think it took
Yeah.
them a while to like catch up to it. But it's just such as ballet companies, especially now, most of them have their own YouTube channel because they realize it's a way to get what they're doing to the masses.
Mhm.
Not everybody can afford a ballet ticket. Not everybody can fly to New York and see New York City Ballet. So it's a way to bring it to everybody across the world, really.
Yeah. How has your channel changed the most over the years? And where do you think it found its niche and what's made the most impact from it? Because what I love is you almost have two branches of what you do. You have like the actual practical classes and things, which I do all the time. I use them for warm-ups before shows. They're amazing. And then you have also the stories. And like you said, pulling the curtain away a little bit and getting real and things. So where do you think the niche for you sort of has been and where that is now?
The surprising thing for me is I thought when I first started it, I thought it was going to be my biggest audience was going to be 13 to 21-year
Mhm.
olds. I'd say over half of my audience are adults,
Mhm.
and I love it. I love that there's this whole group of people who just they're not trying to be professionals, but they just want to get better and they want to improve and this and that. I really think it's completely split. I don't think I fit one particular road or the other. I have so many non-dancers
Mhm.
who watch my videos. Oh, I just wanted to hear your advice on this. Or, oh, I love ballet. I'm not a dancer, but I find it so fascinating. Or I have some people who aren't dancers who literally sit and watch the class videos just
Mhm.
because they want to see, like, this is what a dancer does in their day. So it's really interesting. And then I also cater to a lot of pre-professionals or professionals. I've had a lot of Broadway people tell me that,
Mhm.
particularly the cast of American in Paris.
Oh, yeah, of
Leanne Cope
course.
was like, I do your bar every day. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah.
So it's sort of a split thing for me. And I like going down both. I don't want to forget either audience because I'd say half are dancers and half are not. So
Mhm.
I can't just have it be classes because then you alienate.
Yeah.
I've tried to, like, again, be more inclusive and bring other people into this world.
Mhm.
And then the videos of me dancing is really for anybody because it's no talking. So it's this sort of like I kind of have several paths on there.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me, and I think it's opened up this wonderful world where something that I experienced. So I, from a very young age, was doing singing, acting, dancing, and I was training classically, although I always knew I didn't want to be a classical dancer. So for me, it was always very integrated. And I remember when I got to college and when I got into the professional world of Broadway, there were a lot of musical theater performers. I'd be like, "Hey, do you want to go take a dance class with me?" And they'd be like, "Oh, no, no, I can't do that." And I'd be like, "Well, why?" "Well, I don't know. I'm really scared of it. I can't do it." And I'm like, "Well, would you rather like be embarrassed in class or be embarrassed when you inevitably have to do a dance audition?" And they're like, "We just don't want to like deal with it." And I
Hmm.
think that one thing I'm so excited for people to use your channel for is that it could be a great way if dance is something that's important to what they're doing or interested in, but it's sort of a gateway to exploring it and not feeling like you're on display in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Um, And I don't know, I guess what would you say to any musical theater people out there who might be scared of dance, or they don't necessarily think it's their thing, or movement hasn't really been a part of their vocabulary, as somebody for whom it is the primary way that you express yourself?
I mean, I'd say all are welcome. I mean, I do various levels of videos. I do like, I'll have beginner classes on there and intermediate. So you can start there and build up, again, with no judgment. I say that all the time in my videos, even not just necessarily that no judgment because there's no one there, but don't judge yourself. I do it intentionally, and people, I sort of just integrate it in there. Like, all right, no judgment. You push play. That's the first step.
Yeah.
Like you showed up. And so I think anybody's welcome. And if you want to use my videos, I've had some people use my videos for like a whole year before they feel like they can go and take a ballet class, because again, the ballet world is geared that way. It's very elitist. And so that's sort of the goal. I want you to feel like you could gear up to go in person, because as many classes as I do, there is nothing like in-person training.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. That is really important. But that's the whole point of my videos, is you can do it without anybody judging you or watching you, and ballet is big time mental. So dance in general. So if you can break that barrier with my videos, then you feel comfortable to go to class. So yeah, anybody's welcome.
Why do you think that fear exists in a way around dance that it doesn't seem to in quite the same way with other things? Like, I don't hear people specifically being like, oh, I'm absolutely petrified to take an acting class. Although I'm sure people are, in the same way that I hear like, oh, I couldn't step into a dance studio.
I think there's that sort of bar of perfectionism, especially with ballet. We're trying to be perfect and have the line and the feet and da da da. And with acting, I feel like when I hear people say, oh, I took an acting class and we explored and this and that, I'm like, that's not ballet.
Yeah.
So, like, you're either pointing your feet or you're not. So
Right.
I think there's that like very, very defined parameters in ballet. Like, we all know what it should look like. Whether or not it does is a whole other story.
Right.
But I think that's part of it, especially with dance, is when you're watching it what it should look like. And so with acting, it seems to me, again, I don't know a lot about it, but there's many different avenues you can take. It's like how it's not the acting, but the reacting.
Right.
But with ballet, it's just, you fell over on the turn, so there's this like, I have to be perfect in dance. And so I think that's why it scares people.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is so great about your platform is you also do offer private virtual classes. And one of the things I always found so interesting with my training is that dance is kind of the only one of the triune of, musical theater things where, unless you have a lot of extra money to get private training, all of your training is in a group setting. When you're a singer, unless you're in a choir, all of your training is one-on-one. And when you're an actor, it's pulling people out to work one-on-one with them. But with dance, it's always in a group setting. So there can often be frustrations about, well, am I making improvement? Am I doing this right? I don't know, because there's a lot of general comments. And so I also love that you do offer virtual private classes as well to work one-on-one in a safe space.
I do, especially for adults. I have more private adult students, and sometimes they just want to get on there and talk. Sometimes they just want to get on there and work on specific steps. Another popular thing that has gone down with my private lessons, because they're virtual, is a student will rent a studio if they're preparing for a ballet competition or something. It's more the young ones. But with adults, I think what I'm seeing, especially when they go and take class, not a lot of ballet teachers take them seriously.
Yeah.
And so they feel like either adults are treated like, why don't you know this? Or they're treated like, oh, they're just here for fun. And I had an adult student say to me once, and I will never forget this as long as I live. She was like, can I explain something to you? I said, yeah. She's like, you play the piano, right? Meaning me. And I do. And I said, yeah, I love it. And she said, do you want to get better? I said, well, yeah. She said, do you want to be able to play different pieces? Do you want to like be as proficient as you can possibly be? I said, yeah. She said, do you want to become a concert pianist? I said, no. She said, that's me. That's me with ballet.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, they want to get better. They want to improve. They want to be taken seriously. They don't want to do it professionally.
Yeah.
I feel like ballet is the one thing where you are literally tossed aside if you don't want to be a professional or can't be a professional or whatever. And it's like, oh, well, she doesn't want to,
Yeah.
And there doesn't need to be that defined line. And so with the private lessons, I'm happy to take anybody. I love teaching adults who just simply want to get better.
Yeah.
They just want to improve that pirouette, or they just want to, learn basic alignment because they were never taught.
Mhm.
And so that's sort of my favorite lessons, or when those adults come in and just want to improve.
Mhm.
They're not there to just have fun, but they actually want to just improve.
That's so wonderful. And it's
Mhm.
what you said about being sort of tossed aside, I think is sadly true. For me, it kind of started at an early age because I've always loved classical dance. I've always valued it. I do it consistently, many days a week to this day. But I always knew that my goal was not to join a classical company. But
Mhm.
starting from a very early age, I was not allowed to progress in certain ways or move up in certain ways unless I was going to be on the path to join a classical company and I was going to be there, 7 days a week. There was no wiggle room for, I love this. I want this to be a part of my profession, but in a slightly different way. And so I think a lot of people kind of don't end up having access to the training that they need, even though they're going in a slightly different path. So I do wish that that's something that would maybe make an adjustment a little bit
Oh,
around
for sure. Yeah.
things in general.
Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
another analogy I use is, sorry, I'm sitting on the floor. It's more comfortable for me to sit
Yeah.
on the floor.
Yeah.
Um, dancer problems. Another analogy I use is like when you play sports in school. Does
Mhm.
every person who swims in school go on to the Olympics?
Yeah.
No. Does every high school football player go on to play in the NFL? No.
Mhm.
But they work their hardest and they want to get better and they want to do their best. Doesn't mean they're going to do it professionally or want to do it professionally.
Right.
So with ballet, it's such a different thing. It's like, oh, well, she's never going to be a dancer. So,
Yeah.
and they just get brushed aside. And it's part of the toxic culture of the ballet
Yeah.
world.
And I would be like, well, I'm here like 3-4 days a week, but I also take singing classes. And I grew up in LA. So I was working professionally from a young age. And I'm like, I have a shoot, or I have a show that I'm in, or I have an acting class too. And it doesn't mean I want to, this to be any less.
Mhm.
Um, And the interesting thing is, on the flip side, I feel like sometimes there's a prejudice that exists in the theater world as well. I know when I got into college and whatnot, and everybody had to take dance, it was very much geared toward people that had never done a step touch in their life. And I got kind of a lot of flack for looking too much like a dancer. Um,
Mhm.
Now, not to say that I want to show up looking like a ballerina to every dance audition or audition I do, like certainly not. I want to, have access to different modes of physical expression. But if anybody was a serious dancer, it was strongly criticized that wasn't a good thing. And it wasn't like a tool that you could use. And I don't know, I just sort of wish we could all join together and learn and pursue at the rate and pace that you want to for what you're doing. So I guess speaking of training, for you, what were some of your breakthrough moments that you had when you were training, and how did those come about for you, and how do you try to give those to your students now? Which is hard because everybody's different.
It's totally different. And I think teaching has made me a better dancer
Mhm.
because I've had to learn how to explain the one correction 14 different ways.
Yeah.
And until somebody clicks it. And so for me in my own head, I'm like, oh, I should listen to that advice. That's interesting. And so for me, it's common sense, really. That's my basic way of teaching, that I think, again, the ballet world gets very like, we have to be like this. I'm like, if you're following this way, go this way and it'll be great. Like, it's
Yeah.
fine. So I think part of the just sort of breaking down ballet a little bit in terms of more common sense practices instead of like the Balanchine method or the Vaganova method. The whole point of ballet is technique. All those different things are styles.
Mhm.
They're not techniques, to
Yeah.
be totally honest with you. An arabesque is still an arabesque. A tendu is still a tendu. A pirouette is still a pirouette. Now, the way you take off and the way you land,
Mhm.
that's the style, but it's all one technique. So for me, once I had that, and it was like, oh, all I have to do is change a couple of things, but still a pirouette, if you're off, doesn't matter what style you're doing, you're going to fall.
Mhm.
So it's really taking that away and teaching them alignment. I'm huge on alignment. I'm huge on, staying over your supporting side. If you're pulling off your supporting side, it doesn't work. These little tiny fixes that hopefully help people
Mhm.
And that has nothing to do with 𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐼𝐻𝑒𝐽, 𝑉AGANova, classical, whatever. And that's helped me in my own dancing. Growing up, for me, it was I struggled the most with articulating my feet and my turnout. And it was like little things like a teacher telling me rotate from the back of your leg or use your inner thigh, or just those little muscles that when you're younger, especially I see it with the younger ones, you say wrap the inner thigh, they don't understand what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Once I found those muscles, it was like, oh, I get it. But it takes a while to find it. So that's how I try and structure, is saying different things instead of just saying pull up. I'll
Mhm.
say, think about getting 3 inches taller. If you could be 3 inches taller, what would you do? And they all go like this. And I'm like, there you go. Don't worry about ribs in and just be taller. And it works. So I try and get rid of that complicatedness
Mhm.
around ballet and simplify it.
That's wonderful. And speaking of all the different techniques and styles, I'm curious what your thoughts are that now with this new online access to teachers around the world,
Mhm.
how do you think this is going to change style and technique with future generations? Because, it used to be that, if you went to SAB, you learned the Balanchine style and then that's what you did. And now, you can be virtually taking from you, and you can be learning from the Royal Ballet, and you can be taking from Maria Horova and doing the 𝐵AGANova style. And do you think that it's going to change at all with maybe blending the techniques or styles a bit, or how do you think that might look moving forward?
I think it's going to help because we're already realizing with these young dancers who are trying to get jobs, you
Mhm.
can't just be a classical dancer anymore. You
Yeah.
can't just be a Balanchine. Like even at City Ballet, we did Sleeping Beauty. We
Mhm.
did, at Royal Ballet is doing Balanchine. Royal Ballet is doing, Wayne McGregor, and I don't know if they do Forsyth, but they do like different styles now. You can't like you're not just going to go do Swan Lake at the Royal Ballet anymore, and it's just the same with many many companies. And so it's only going to help. The more diversified you are as a dancer, the better. To be able to snap into the different styles, because when a Balanchine repetitor comes to set a Balanchine ballet, they're
Mhm.
going to want to see the style. You can't do Balanchine ballets looking like,
Mhm.
you can't. It's not going to work. Trust me, it's not going to work. So you've got to be able to like switch it. And the more it's sort of like being a triple threat in the Broadway world, the
Yeah.
more diverse you are, the more employable and the more useful you are. And so I think it's just going to help, to be
Do
honest.
you think at any point there might become a blurring of styles to some degree, unless you're like specifically doing a Balanchine ballet or a Macmillan ballet or whatnot, that it might start to blend a little bit in things where it's not as specific?
I think for sure. I think everybody has their stylistic tendencies. Like when I do classical variations on YouTube, people are like, "Oh, we still see your Balanchine port de bras, your Balanchine musicality," because that's how I was trained.
Mhm.
And it is going to bleed a little bit. I think the most important thing for dancers is to find what looks best on them and
Mhm.
bring it to everything.
Yeah.
Because I even had people telling me at City Ballet I would do Balanchine ballets different than most people, because in New York City Ballet I was actually the classical girl because I
Mhm.
was the least Balanchine stylistically there.
Yeah.
And they really liked it. They're like, "Oh, we've never seen it." Was Dewdrop. I remember Benjamin Millepied standing in the wings and saying, "Oh, I've never seen anybody do Dewdrop like that." And I'm going, I I don't know what I did differently, but okay, you know,
Yeah.
because I wasn't the little sprite. I was more lyrical and classical. So I think it just helps if you really, regardless of style, find who you are and
Mhm.
own who you are. Kind of like in life,
Yeah.
the better it is.
I love your emphasis on finding what makes you unique. It's something that I really value, and I don't hear it talked about a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I just finished reading that new book ABT Plus, where they talk about when 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 started training with David Howard, and she would say, "I want to look like this dancer," and he'd be like, "Well, you have short arms, so you're not going to look like them." It's like, "Well, no, I have to. No, we're going to figure out what looks best for you." And I love that that's something that you really emphasize with your students in your training, because I
Yeah.
feel like it, especially in the dance world where your career peaks so young, when you're still at that stage of wanting to impress people or wanting to look like your heroes. I really love that this emphasis is now changing a bit into finding what makes you special and unique. Um,
Oh, totally. And I went through that same thing as a young dancer. I
oh
wanted
yeah.
to be Wendy Whalen.
Mhm.
I wanted to be whomever. And people were like, "You look nothing like Wendy." And Ashley Batter was the other one. Like Ashley Batter's this like short, she can like out jump the guys. Like she's just ridiculous. And people were like, "You realize that you're never going to look like that." Like, so once I realized, why am I trying to be her? Let me be me. Let me be the best version of me. That's when I started to really have success. Instead of trying to mimic, I see a lot of dancers trying to mimic. And it never works. You have to do what looks the best and feels the best on you. And that's when I started to own my classicalness at the City Ballet. And it served me very well.
How do you think that your training and career might have been different if you'd had the access, if you'd had access to the kind of online resources that exist today? Like if there had been a Kathryn Morgan online when you were growing up, do you think it would have changed your training or your career or anything at all?
I don't know. First of all, I would have been obsessed because I said this on YouTube, like when I was younger, all we had was like Dance Magazine, Point Magazine, Dance Spirit. That was it. And I would like put it over and over and over any little thing I could get. So I would have been that kid that was like on YouTube 24/7. But that's sort of how I started and geared my channel at the start was, okay, if I was little Kathryn Morgan at age whatever, what would I want to know? What did I want to know? What would have inspired me? And that's really where it started from. It's evolved since. But yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time. When I'm ever stuck for a video, I go back to that. Like, what am I going to do now? Well, what would you have wanted to learn if there was a Kathryn Morgan and you were 13, 14, 15, 16? And it gives me content, honestly.
Yeah.
It does.
What do you think would have been different for you if you had had that?
I think, it's also a catch-22 because part of today's day and age is social media and the Instagram and the YouTube. I actually think I would have had a harder time.
That's valid. That's very, very true.
Because these kids, I see them. They're on Instagram like, oh, so-and-so just posted a picture and I have to look at that. I have to look at that. Let me crank my leg and they're in this constant state of comparing and I've got to look like that and pressure. And I'm like, do you realize, does any of us ever post anything that makes us look bad on Instagram? No, we don't want to post our picture. We don't. So I try and say, look, what you see on Instagram is not necessarily real life, or a photo does not mean that's how they dance. Yes, her leg is way up here. Did she whack it? Or did she actually développé and hold it? You know what I mean? So I think I would have been, knowing my personality when I was younger, I did not have a strong constitution. I was at auditions, I was the one in the corner, like, please like me. So I think I would have struggled big time because I would have just been so wrapped up. So I actually am glad we didn't have all this when I was younger.
Yeah, very valid. And me as well. Wow. What do you think is the biggest thing missing from dance training in general?
The mental side. The mental side. I think, again, we so worry about what it looks like, and teachers have no concept of, especially with teenagers, their mental part of things, their mental health. You have to be, I try and be very mindful. My fiance does as well, because he's on faculty at Ballet West Academy. He tries to be very mindful of, okay, she's 16. How do I address this the right way? How do I not send her down the spiral hole of, and into her own brain? So it's just being aware, and a lot of the old way of thinking was, well, I shouldn't have to worry about how I say something. Well, you do now. You have to worry about how you say it. You have to be very mindful of, these are young kids. They are growing. They are developing. You can't run them into the ground. They are not professionals yet. Do you know what I mean? And even with professionals, you need to be careful. We all need to be more mindful. But with training, a lot of dance teachers forget that those students not only are not professionals, but they are paying you. They are not your employees. They are paying you. They are paying to be there. So we have to be so mindful of how we treat them and what we say, because they are important as the person and not just the dancer. So what if their pirouette is not perfect? How are you damaging them mentally?
Mhm.
How are you, lifting them up mentally? How are you going about them as a whole person and not just as the pirouette?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that there's been a lot of conversations about in the Broadway community. I mean, it's notorious that the vast majority of theater training programs will call in the seniors on their first day of their senior year and say, like, flat out, so boys, you need to gain 30 pounds of muscle, and girls, I don't care what weight you are, you need to lose 30 pounds by the end of the year. Like,
Yep.
and it just keeps going on, and the things that get said in auditions and whatnot. And it's definitely a struggle. I think in any part of the entertainment industry, it's especially a struggle in the dance industry. And you're such a beautiful, positive voice for that needing to change. Have you seen any real applicable shift in the way, not just in terms of people's views, but the way that maybe companies are starting to be run, or the things that dancers are demanding as a result of these conversations?
It's going to be a slow process. The ballet world has not changed as much as people have been led it to believe.
Right.
I think the pandemic actually helped that a little bit, because people are starting to realize, dancers especially, are starting to realize their priorities. Dancers are starting to realize, I don't have to be miserable. Like we all took a step away, and a lot of dancers retired because they're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I think companies have had to reevaluate. I think companies are having to go, okay, hold on, I think it's going to be a generational shift. I think once my generation takes over, then it will finally be the complete change. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I've seen little things here and there. I think the first step is having the conversation, which is what we are doing.
Yeah.
We are talking about it. We are bringing light to it. Some of us are going, hey, this hasn't changed, and I felt like I could be one of those people to speak out, because I am not in a position where my job depends on it. So many dancers can't speak out because they are worried, and rightly so, about being fired.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that no one's ever said anything, because we just don't, because I'll be fired. So I'm going to suffer in silence. And that doesn't work anymore. And I think those of us that are speaking out, who should, and we are starting the conversation, which I think is the first step.
Yeah. I mean, I also think it's just so fascinating I love theater and dance history. And when you look back at films and photos from generations ago, they don't have the same kind of bodies that most people have today. And they were considered absolutely elite and at the top of their game.
Yeah.
But it's such a cultural thing just in the world at large, that I hope that there's some positive changes that start happening on the ground up. And I don't know if you were running a company, which you sort of are. I mean, you have Kathryn Morgan and Friends, which is awesome.
Yeah,
It's a slightly non-traditional company, but still an awesome company. But if you were the artistic director, how would you balance a general certain need for an aesthetic that is debatable but exists in some form, with wanting everybody to be healthy and have wonderful different body types included? And what would your paradigm for that be if you were the one in charge?
That's a very tricky question. I think for me, I always felt my best and was in my best shape when I felt good about myself and was dancing a lot. Part of the problems with ballet companies is you are taken out of roles, which I have been many times, until you're thin enough.
Right.
But then you're not dancing.
Yeah.
And it is impossible to get in dancing shape unless you're dancing.
Right.
So it's just like you're on the hamster wheel. So I would probably not, if I was a director, I might not address it at all at the start, and just keep people dancing, and just talk about technique, and just talk about them as humans, and just talk about their mental health, and not even worry about it at the start. And get them dancing, get them in the studio, get them feeling good about themselves, and see what happens.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds wonderful. I like that.
Now, again, it's easier said than done.
Right.
And then if someone did have an issue, I would address it first of, how are you doing? Talk to me. How are you feeling? I wouldn't even address it as a weight issue, because 99% of the time, it's not an actual food issue.
Right.
it's a food issue because of something else. It's a stress issue. It's an unhappy issue. It has nothing to do with the food itself.
Yeah.
So I would address that first.
I do find it shocking how much I consistently do not hear anybody ever asking, how are you doing? Like in any capacity in the arts.
Nope. Nope. And I heard somebody said this, I can't remember who it was. Somebody said, one of the hard parts about being in the ballet world is it is an art, but unlike something like painting, where it's paint on a canvas, or when you're doing music, the musical notes on the page, the musical notes and the paints are people.
Right.
And so you can't treat them like objects because they're not. They are human beings. And I was just like, I can't take credit for that. I can't remember who said that to me, when or where, but I just thought that's what it is. We're not the paint sitting there in the jar. And if you don't like the work, toss it. It's fine. No one's feelings get hurt. You can't do that with dancers.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with Broadway actors either, because you all are the actual art happening, but you're human beings.
Yeah. And things like, I remember it took me a shockingly long time to realize that some things that I couldn't do were because of the way my body was built. I mean, it's why with, the 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐽𝐻 Academy, they do like these crazy measurements of all the students when they're accepted. And, if your body's not built a certain way, your leg is not going to like be double jointed, like floating around the back of your head or whatnot. But I think those are things that make us unique and special and help us find wonderful niches that advance the art form. So I love that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit for the theater people out there that may not be dancers? This is a horrible question, but what do you love so much about dance? Why dance and not another medium? What do you feel when you're dancing and that you can express as a dancer that you can't any other way?
I think a couple of things. One of the reasons I started dancing when I was little, it was the music. My mom said that she would, in order to, when I was like still in the crib and in the carrier, she's like, in order to take a shower, all I had to do was put on music and you were occupied. So me putting on music, like, let me take a shower and wash my hair when you were a baby. Yeah. And she said, even after that, you just you loved music, particularly classical, so much that you would want to become the music. And the only way you knew how was by dancing, which is it. Like, she said, you were like, when you're 2. And so for me, it's still that. For my favorite ballets are the ones that are my favorite scores. If it's a score I don't like, I can't get behind it. I don't feel as drawn to it. So for me, it's the music. I was also very shy as a child, and ballet was sort of my way of expressing myself without getting in trouble. You can be very open and whatever on stage without offending anyone, by saying anything or aggressively doing. So it was my way of expressing myself too. And it still is. It still is my way of expression, and just music and becoming the music.
Now, I know that you do play piano, but why do you think that love of music and becoming the music translated for you into dance as opposed to wanting to become a classical musician?
I think it was the movement. I think I didn't want to sit. And I think it was moving. It was, the actual activity part of it, the body move, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just fingers or sitting or this way. I needed to like move. Yeah. So.
And has that changed at all in any way for you over the years as you've matured as a dancer?
Not really. I mean, my best roles were always the acting ones, like Juliet or something with a story. It's again still my way of expressing myself. Like Black Swan is so much fun. Yeah. In Swan Lake. You get to be the bad girl without anybody getting hurt. It's great. Yeah. And so it's still the same even now that I'm 33. So
I've been somebody that works in a lot of mediums and is also a writer and a creator. I've recently been finding it so fascinating that there are so many ballets that have never been interpreted into another medium. Like there's no play of 𝐬𝐮𝐬 or musical of 𝐬𝐮𝐬 or Swan. I mean, I guess you could maybe argue the movie Black Swan a little bit, but that's not a straight adaptation. But these stories that really, I'm sure you could, but primarily are only told through dance because there's certain things that you can tell that way that you can't in any other way, which I just find so, I find so fascinating, these amazing stories that have never been translated into any other mediums.
It's
So,
true. And I actually had a Broadway friend explain it to me once. He was like, in a show, when words aren't enough, people sing.
yeah,
And when singing's not enough, people dance. And so it's like, how do you pull it back?
yeah,
How do you tell Giselle through talking?
yeah.
Like it would be very difficult. You'd have to really, I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah. And that's why I wish that more theater people would get into dance, because I feel like it's an entire other vocabulary of expression that
Mm-hmm.
just frees you up and is so exciting. I remember when I was little, like really little, I didn't understand that musical theater was a career that you could have as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about like Annie, but I thought that when I got to be older, I was going to have to decide if I was going to be a classical dancer, like a Shakespearean actor, or like a classical vocalist. And those were
Mm-hmm.
going to be my choices. At 5, I decided I was going to invent musical theater for adults because I didn't want to have to choose. But one of the things that frustrated me about the idea of solely being a straight actor was how completely separated from physicality most of the plays that I went to see were.
Mm-hmm.
I did love Shakespeare and those things. They were very physical, but so many plays are people sitting around a table talking. And my work that I create is very physical. And I wish that that could be incorporated more as a vocabulary, because I think it's very vital and important. And speaking of acting, did you have any acting training as part of your training coming up? Because you're a beautiful actress, and I wish that acting was more incorporated into dance training.
Thank you. No, I didn't. No,
Mm,
I mean, and part of it is that that's how I was trained to act. Like with ballet, you cannot speak, so
yeah.
you figure out real fast how to tell it through your eyes, how to tell it through looks, or whatever it is. If you cannot speak, you
Mhm.
have to have it read somehow.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I guess the acting was part of the rehearsal process for us, and how to say something with your eyes, how to say something with a look or with a gesture, because you have no dialogue.
Yeah.
So
How
the steps are our dialogue.
how for you do you balance the storytelling part of a role with the technical requirements? Because it's something I find challenging in every role that I do, whatever the medium. But there's sometimes when you just want to be lost in the acting, and then there's very technically difficult things that you have coming up. So how for you do you balance that and wanting to hit both as strongly as you can while not being in your head?
Luckily, something like Juliet is more about the acting.
Mhm.
It can be as technical as you want it to be, but that's not what the audience remembers,
Right.
quite frankly. So for me with Juliet, I forgot about the technique. I would really be aware of it in rehearsal so that it became muscle memory. We dancers rely a lot on muscle memory,
Yeah.
so that when you get on stage, you can totally forget about the technique
Yeah.
and just be in the story. Because I remember shows where I was not in the story and where I was worried about the technique did not go well. Like at all.
Yep.
And it was the ones that I was completely like, whoa, what just happened? That was the best show I had.
Mhm.
I remember actually Robbie Fairchild, who is Broadway, American in Paris, big
Yeah.
star now. He and I got thrown on together for Romeo and Juliet.
Mhm.
We were not originally partners, but mine got hurt. So 3 hours before the show, we were like, all right, you guys are on, good luck.
Was
there
Robbie the one who dropped you down the stairs, or was that someone else?
No, that was Seth. That was Seth.
Go listen to Katie's podcast. It's a wonderful, wonderful story.
Oh, that's funny. It was fine. All was well. I was supposed to be dead at that point, so no one knew. So anyway, but Robbie and I got thrown on 3 hours ahead, and there was no ballet master available, no coach available to rehearse us. So they were like, go to studio and figure it out. So we were like, okay. So we intentionally decided that we were not going to rehearse the acting. We were
Mhm.
like, let's go through the technique, mechanics, this lift. Okay, there were like 3 different versions of balcony pas de deux. All right, which one do you do? All right,
Right.
this step or this step. Okay, and then we intentionally did not touch the acting and
Mhm.
left it totally spontaneous. Best show I've had. Best show I've ever had.
Yeah.
And people were like packed in the wing. And it was just sort of this magical thing because we were just so in it. We did the technical and then forgot about it and
Yeah.
just was in the story. So yeah.
Do you find that any of that is missing from the training that you see your students get? Because I find that dancers are able to do the most incredible things that like you never would have even dreamed of, like 50 years ago.
Totally.
But I know you really care very deeply about artistry, but I feel like there's an artistry that sometimes goes missing with that.
Mhm.
Um,
I
and
see it in young students all the time. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, no, and just how you would suggest taking steps to rectify that in general.
I think people forget that 90% of the audience doesn't know whether you do 5 pirouettes or 2 pirouettes.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have no clue. Like take my parents, for example. They don't know. Like they have no idea. But they do know if they go to any ballet and some dancer is not in it, if some dancer is just like this but technical, they want to be moved by the story. The audience wants to be moved. And so I think there's such a focus now because dancers are required to do more and more and more and more and more tricks than ever before, that the artistry does get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of this like, let's pack as many things as we can get in, and you know what, if the artistry's not there, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of seeing it in things like figure skating too.
Yeah.
How many quads can we do?
Mm-hmm.
How many, and it's like, yeah, there is an element of the artistry that gets forgotten about. Some teachers are good about bringing it back, but I know like when I judge ballet competitions, if a girl comes out and does the Black Swan variation and like turns a million times, but does it like with no expression, I'm like, all right, next. Like,
Right.
I don't care. I don't care how many pirouettes you can do if you don't become Odile.
Yeah.
Like become the character. Then I'm not even concerned. She did 3, 5. I don't know how many she did. You know what I mean? Like it completely changes. So I think there is a lack of that because ballets are getting so much harder. It's not just Swan Lake anymore.
Right.
There are all these new choreographers emerging and they're throwing stuff at dancers and it's harder than ever before. But there still needs to be that artistry element.
Yeah. Do you think competitions have negatively impacted that at all? Because you're a judge who clearly values artistry very much, but it's like you said, dance it's not all as subjective as some other things, but it's putting it into a subjective state of, you can't always judge who acted a moment better, but you can theoretically judge who did more pirouettes, which I think can be problematic sometimes.
Yeah. Well, what the students don't know is the judges, we all go back to the judging room and we're just like, where's the artist? Like we're all like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And so it ends up being who did it better technically.
Yeah.
Where if somebody came out and blew the artistry out of the water, that'd be really interesting. And for us too, it's not just about how many pirouettes you do, but how you do them.
Yeah.
Did you cheat your way going into it? Did you do a big jump and turn your feet in before you did it? It's the articulation. The articulation and your transitions are part of the artistry.
Yeah.
It's not just step, step, whack. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
yeah.
How do you place your feet before the big kick? Not just, So that's part of it as well, is the finesse.
Yeah. And again, that's another reason I'm so excited that people have access to your platform, because I think in all the arts, I think it was Judi Dench wrote a really great article about this, that it can be elitist in the sense that you have to have money in order to train and get private coaching and get the costumes and get the plane flights to the places. And we can just log on often for us for free and get that wonderful training from you. And I hope that that will break down some of those things in the future. My favorite question to ask is, what's a question that you've always wanted to be asked in an interview but never have been?
Oh, I don't know. You're pretty good at this.
Thank you.
I'd have to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you get the usual like, what would you tell your younger self? What would you, I don't know. I think I would love somebody to ask me a question that stumps me. I would love somebody to ask me a question like, what do you not want to hear anymore? Or what do you get tired of being asked?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a really good one. I don't know if I have an answer.
What do you get tired of being asked?
Probably, when I have a channel of 400 plus videos and somebody says, do you have any tips on being a professional dancer? And I'm like, oh no. Well, and that right there, part of that problem is that they want you to do the work for them.
Right.
And that's something I say on YouTube all the time. I can sit here and give you 400 plus videos of content. You're the one that has to apply them.
Yeah.
I can sit here until I'm blue in the face and give you content. but unless you apply it, that's on you, you know? So that's always funny to me, is when somebody's like, "Do you have any tips to be a professional dancer?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yep, 400 videos worth."
Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't know. That's a good question.
Um, I also, again, I love how much information and content you have, and I love how much cross training there is.
Mhm.
One of the wonderful things I take advantage of is I remember my mindset as a young dancer was, you know, you show up for class and then whatever the teacher does, that's what you need to do that day and whatnot. And becoming a professional, being like, oh, today I really just need to sort of stretch. And so I'll put on like one of your stretch videos and it's great. And one day I might be like, I need to cross train. I'm going to do some Pilates, and being able to customize it really for what your own body needs and being aware of your body. And I think that's just great and wonderful. One other random question I had, I know you talked about loving classical music so much. Why do you think you were so drawn to classical music from a young age as opposed to other types of music?
Don't know. I think for me, I always love when there are no lyrics, because then you can kind of interpret it for yourself. Maybe that's
Mhm.
part of it. Um, I don't know, something about the beauty of it. I
Mhm.
love, you know, different phrasing and different instruments. I don't know what it was specifically, but I think it was
Yeah.
just the sheer beauty of it and the thought behind it, and the you can interpret it how you want to instead of here are the lyrics.
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
because
And this,
I've always loved Broadway too, to be honest.
yeah,
Like I really have.
I think
Phantom
you
was
did
the first show I
wonderfully on
ever saw.
Broadway. Side
Yeah,
note.
yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Phantom before I ever saw New York City Ballet. Like that was the
Mhm.
first thing I saw.
Yeah.
So,
You'd
but it
be
has
perfect for
ballet in
Phantom.
it.
So I'm tall. I'm 5'9". So I had to like make my peace with the fact that I was probably never going to play Christine because there's a height cutoff at 5'7" to be any of the
Really? Oh,
girls. Yeah, because the height translates to age on stage, which can be a thing.
hmm.
I did get called in for Christine, and I knew I wasn't going to get it because of my height, and I was just like living for it. And I got to go and be like, I can do actual point work.
Yeah.
I brought my
She does
gainers.
that
Like
little
I'm.
yeah. Yeah.
I can do it. But you'd be wonderful on Broadway.
Well,
We'd love to have you.
Sarah Esty right now, who is former Miami, is Meg now, right now on Broadway. So
Nice.
yeah, she's we know each other sort of through the business, but yeah, it'd be fun. You know what? I'm always impressed with you guys, Broadway people,
Yeah.
because you do the same show every day. Like during Nutcracker,
Yeah.
6 week run, we were all like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. And people on Broadway are like, I've been in this show for 4 years. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it gets
how
really
do you do it?
tricky. Like in Wicked, the stage is on a rake, and there are
Mhm.
people in
That's
tennis
right.
shoes and some people in heels. And there's some of the lifts that happen in the Ozdas ballroom where the guys are like lifting the girls in a semicircle upstage and some of the injuries and PT that
Mm.
has to be done. Yeah, 8 shows a week. I remember when I first figured out that classical dancers didn't do 8 shows a week, and I was like, what? What?
We sorry. We
Mm,
did during Nutcracker, but that was it. And
yeah.
we were all like on the floor. And I remember actually a lot of my former colleagues were in Carousel,
Mhm.
and they did 8 shows a week. I remember Brittany Pollock, who's now back at City Ballet.
Mhm.
She was like, "Girl, I'm lopsided."
Yeah.
She's like, "Everything's on one side, and we only ever do one side, and I have to do this 8 times
Yeah.
a week." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like,
And then if you're singing too,
yeah.
because the way you use your muscles for singing is diametrically opposite to the way
Mhm.
that you use them as a dancer. So that's always super fun too.
Yeah.
But here's, I guess, one last question is maybe sort of random, but you've given so much to me and to the just the world at large. I was going to say the dance and theater communities, but it's to people who aren't in those communities too. What are some things that we can do for you and to support you and give back to you?
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know. You mean me specifically, or like the dance world?
Well, I guess to start with you specifically.
Just, you can follow. I'd love for you anybody to follow me on YouTube or Instagram. That would be wonderful. I try and keep it very joyful and very real on my channels. There is a lot of me dancing on there.
Well, which is wonderful because we all very much enjoy seeing you dance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But really, it's just, I love when Broadway people and ballet people support each other, which is why when that crossover happened a few years ago with On the Town and American in Paris and Carousel, it was so exciting. And there was that sort of marrying of the two. I would love, the problem is most of the time in New York, the schedule is the same.
Yeah.
So like you can't, if you're on, you can't go see Broadway or vice versa.
Right.
But just being more supportive of each other, I would love there to be more ballet on Broadway. I also remember I was not, us having to audition for West Side Story Suite because we do the suite version of Robin's West Side Story at New York City Ballet. It's like a 20-minute condensed version, but there is singing. So Anita sings, Riff sings, and I think Rosalinda. Yeah, she sings. And we all had to audition, and it was the most traumatizing experience of most of our lives. Like just crying coming out of the room because that's not what we're trained to do. We are not trained to open our mouths on stage.
Yeah.
I ended up doing Maria because she was the one principal that didn't sing. But it was just so much fun to not have to be perfect.
Yeah.
I would love more of that kind of ballets as well as more ballet on Broadway. Like, I don't know, just more marrying of the two.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to take up singing, I know some lovely people to connect to.
Okay, good to know. I did a little musical a while ago. It was like off Broadway. And it was tough. I had to sing a lot and it was tough for me. It was like conquering my greatest fear. But it was a ballet musical and I had the best time. It was so much fun.
Awesome.
But yeah, if anybody wants to do another Broadway show with ballet in it, call me.
Oh, I'm so down. I wish that dance would be more integrated into it. I mean, it's, musical theater is famous for being, integrated dance, music, and acting, but I feel like it's kind of diverged even more in recent years. I love what Jagged Little Pill is doing with their choreography. It's very contemporary and actively telling the story, but I don't know, you kind of get golden age shows where there's a lot of wonderful tapping. You get some shows like Phantom that have some classical dance, and then you get a couple like Jagged Little Pill, and then you get some where there's just not a lot of dancing at all. And I wish that we could all work together because I think they're all wonderful, equal vocabularies that we should be able to utilize and not be afraid of. And thank you so much for giving us an active way that we can continue doing that or start learning about it or continue developing ourselves. I know your work has meant so much to me. I do your classes like on a weekly basis. So,
thank you.
Yeah, no, seriously. And I bring them backstage to the theaters. I'm like, come on, everybody, let's do Kathryn Morgan's class to warm up.
Well, and it's so hard to motivate yourself to give yourself class. That's another reason I do it is for those people who literally are in the theater and don't have a class before the show.
Yeah.
Like, there it is do it. That's what it's there for.
And I learned so many wonderful cross-training things from you, like stretches and Pilates things that like I'd never, and I was shocked that I'd never seen them before, but I'm like, these are so great and so valuable. So, yeah. And you can do it in the safety of your living room where nobody's seen you. And it's just a wonderful,
just be careful of the floor.
Yes. Yes.
Careful of the floor.
Yeah. But I mean, we all dance and we all move when we're children, and that kind of, I feel like gets taken away from us. And I feel like we should all embrace it some more.
And another one I just did recently, it just popped into my head was we Balanchine Slaughter on 10th Avenue. It's the excerpt from On Your Toes. I had more fun putting heels on. I was so happy not to put pointe shoes on. I was like, oh, this is a heel ballet. It's so great. And it was so much fun because again, anytime those pieces pop into the rep, it's not about perfection. And that's what makes it so fun. So I feel like if we could marry the two more often, it would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, no, well, thank you so much again for joining me. Where can we follow you? What are your social media handles? What's your YouTube channel? How can we all follow you?
I have YouTube. All you do is type my name, Kathryn, Kathryn Morgan. It comes right up. Instagram is Kathryn_Morgan. And then my website is, I have two of them, kathrynmorganonline.com. That's getting an overhaul soon, by the way, so that'll be updated. Nice. And then just kmandfriends.com. That's where I have online classes and private coaching and any sort of, that's my new venture as part of what I do, is kmandfriends.com.
And you have a wonderful, the Kathryn Morgan Hall where we
Mhm.
can get dance wear. You have a necklace that's out now. Uh,
Yes.
and we can all come see you soon in the Nutcracker because you'll be guesting, right?
If you are in Texas, Alabama, or Kansas,
Nice.
I'll be this weekend. Actually, I leave on Thursday. Texas A&M with Ballet Brazos. One Friday to Saturday. I'll be in Mobile, Alabama next weekend on the 11th and 12th, and I'll be in Topeka, Kansas on the 18th and 19th. So
Man, you
I'm
have
sugar plumbing
fast
it
rehearsals with many
up.
different companies.
All different, three different partners too, by the way.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that's a bit stressful because the heights are different. And you're just
Yeah.
like, okay, here we
Are you
go.
doing the same choreo for each
Mhm.
one?
Oh, yes. That was
Okay.
sort of my sticking point. I was like, I do the same version. Even if it's three different people, same version. All
Oh, I just took class with a friend who's doing Cavalier at like 3 different companies, and he's doing different choreography at every single one
Oh,
of those
God bless
companies.
him. Like, it's so hard to do because it's just a different pace. It's a different mindset.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for being
Oh,
you and for being an incredible inspiration
thank you.
and for just the enormous gift that you've given me and everybody at large. You you really have kind of changed the face of dance and the face of dance training and the community. And I'm very grateful to get to virtually see you in person and
Oh,
thank
thank
you
you.
for that. And I hope many, many more people come to benefit from it as well.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm trying to, my whole new tagline now is just bringing the joy back to ballet
Mhm.
because so many of us start ballet because we love it. And by the end, we hate it because of
Yeah.
the culture, the toxic place, the things that are said to us. And so I'm trying to bring that back.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And thank you for continuing to do that. And we are here to support you as well. So I know you've had many challenges that you've overcome with wonderful grace, and we are here to support you with anything that comes in the future, both good and bad.
Thank
So,
you. I appreciate that. Thank you so
of
much.
course.